Here's a number that should be impossible. The median retirement savings for American households headed by someone between 55 and 64, people standing at the door of retirement, is about $185,000. Sounds okay until you do the math. Spread over a 25-year retirement, that's around $7,000 a year. And that's the median for households that saved. Depending on which survey you read, somewhere between a quarter and half of American households have essentially nothing set aside at all. Retiring broke isn't a rare tragedy in America. It's closer to the default setting. So how did the richest country in history end up here? Follow the money. For most of American history, retirement wasn't really a thing. You worked until your body gave out and then your kids took care of you. If you didn't have kids or they couldn't afford you, there was the county poorhouse. That was the system. Two inventions changed it. The first was Social Security, created in 1935 when poverty among the elderly was widespread and brutal. It was designed as a floor, insurance against being old and destitute, not as a full paycheck replacement. The second was the company pension. For a few decades after World War II, a big chunk of American workers, especially union workers at large corporations, earned what's called a defined benefit pension. Work 30 years, retire, and the company mails you a check every month until you die. The company carried the investment risk. You just showed up. Then starting around 1980, corporate America discovered something cheaper, the 401k. That's a tax-advantaged account where you set aside your own wages, often with a partial employer match, and invest it yourself. It was originally a tax loophole for executives. It became the entire retirement system. Pensions quietly disappeared from the private sector, and the risk, market crashes, bad timing, outliving your money, moved from the company's balance sheet onto yours. That's the origin story of retiring broke. America didn't decide to have a savings crisis. It decided, one benefits meeting at a time, that retirement was now your problem. So what does it actually cost to be old in America with no money? Start with the gap. The average retired household spends somewhere in the range of $50,000 to $60,000 a year, depending on the survey, the region, and whether the house is paid off. Now look at the income side. The average Social Security retirement benefit in 2026 is roughly $2,080 a month. That's about $25,000 a year. For a couple with two average benefits, call it $50,000. For a single retiree, Social Security alone covers maybe half of a typical retirement, often less, and averages flatter the picture. Plenty of retirees, people with short work histories, low lifetime wages, years spent caregiving, collect far less. Claim early at 62, and your monthly check is permanently reduced, sometimes by close to 30% compared to waiting until full retirement age. Here's where the difference between average and median matters. The average retirement savings for households aged 55 to 64 is over $500,000. The median, the household right in the middle, is around $185,000. That enormous gap exists because a small number of very wealthy households drag the average up. The median tells you the truth. Half of near retirees have less than that. And again, a large share have nothing. Now add debt, because retiring broke increasingly means retiring in the red. According to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances, the typical debt load for households headed by someone 65 to 74 roughly quadrupled between the early 90s and 2022, from about $10,000 to $45,000. For households 75 and up, it went from $5,000 to $36,000. One industry survey found that about two-thirds of retirees reported carrying credit card debt in 2024, at interest rates hovering around 21%. One more cost that's easy to miss: time. A 65-year-old today can reasonably expect to live another 20 years, and many will live 30. Every extra year of life is a wonderful thing, and another year of rent, utilities, groceries, and health premiums that the money has to cover. The result shows up in the poverty data. By the government's official measure, about 10% of Americans 65 and older were poor in 2024. By the Census Bureau's supplemental measure, which counts out-of-pocket medical costs and actual living expenses, it was 15%. That made seniors the poorest age group in the country. Now, the interesting question: if millions of Americans are retiring broke, where did the money go? Because it went somewhere. Start with the employer side. Killing the pension was one of the great cost-shifting operations in business history. A defined benefit pension is a promise a company has to fund for decades. A 401k match is a line item it can trim, suspend during a recession, and cap. When companies made that switch, the savings didn't vanish. They flowed to shareholders and to the bottom line. The risk flowed to you. Next, the financial industry. The 401k system moved trillions of dollars of retirement money into accounts managed by mutual fund companies, insurers, and plan administrators, an industry that collects fees, whether your investments do well or not. Fees have come down over the years thanks to competition and index funds, but small percentages on trillions of dollars are still an enormous business. Every payroll cycle, a river of American wages flows through Wall Street on its way to retirement, and the toll booths along that river are very profitable. And notice who the system serves best. The tax breaks attached to retirement accounts are worth the most to high earners in high tax brackets and worth almost nothing to the low-wage worker who can't afford to contribute in the first place. Then there's the business of being broke itself, because financial stress at 70 is a market. Credit card companies earn interest, around 21% lately, on retirees who put groceries and prescriptions on plastic. Reverse mortgage lenders let homeowners over 62 convert their home equity into cash in exchange for fees, interest, and a shrinking inheritance. Predatory sales operations target seniors with annuities they don't understand and gold coins they don't need. Debt collectors buy up old medical bills. None of these industries created the retirement shortfall. All of them monetize it. And don't forget the labor market. Nearly 20% of Americans 65 and older were working or looking for work in 2024, almost double the rate of the mid-1980s. Some love their jobs, but surveys consistently find that a large share keep working because they can't afford to stop. For employers, that's a pool of experienced labor. For the economy, it's a quiet subsidy. The gap in the retirement system is being filled with the bodies of 70-year-olds bagging groceries and driving school buses. So who actually pays for a broke retirement? Roughly in this order. First, Social Security, which is to say current workers, since today's payroll taxes fund today's benefits. For a huge share of retirees, Social Security isn't a supplement, it's the whole show. Nearly 8 in 10 retired Americans say they rely on it to cover necessary expenses, and more than half describe themselves as very reliant. By the government's own analysis, without Social Security, the poverty rate among seniors would nearly quadruple. In 2024, the program lifted almost 29 million people above the supplemental poverty line. It is quietly the largest anti-poverty program in the country. Second, the retiree pays, with whatever assets are left. The home usually goes last. It gets borrowed against, sold to downsize, or eventually spent down on care. For most middle-class Americans, the house is the retirement plan they didn't know they were making. Third, family pays. Adult children cover rent shortfalls, prescriptions, car repairs, and eventually caregiving. That help usually arrives exactly when those children, often in their 50s, should be saving for their own retirement, which is how a broke retirement replicates itself across generations. The daughter who cuts back to part-time to help her mother is also cutting her own future Social Security benefit, one missing quarter of earnings at a time. And the unpaid caregiving itself is worth staggering money. Estimates of the economic value of unpaid family care in America run into the hundreds of billions of dollars a year. Fourth, taxpayers pay again through the safety net. Medicare, the federal health insurance program for people 65 and up, covers hospitals and doctors, but not most long-term care. When a broke retiree needs a nursing home, the bill eventually lands on Medicaid, the federal and state program for people with low income and almost no assets. But Medicaid only steps in after the person has spent nearly everything they own. That's the final stop of retiring broke. The government pays, but only once there's nothing left to protect. The visible cost of retiring broke is a small bank balance. The hidden costs are bigger. There's the claiming penalty. People who hit 62 with no savings and no job often have no choice but to take Social Security immediately, locking in a permanently reduced check for the rest of their lives. The people who can least afford a smaller benefit are the ones most likely to end up with one. Meanwhile, wealthier retirees can afford to wait until 70 and collect the maximum. The system rewards exactly the people who need the reward least. There's health. Broke retirees skip dental work, hearing aids, and prescriptions. Medicare's coverage of all three ranges from partial to non-existent. Deferred care in your late 60s tends to become expensive, catastrophic care in your late 70s. Some of it billed to the retiree, much of it eventually to taxpayers. There's the work until you drop tax. Working past 65 sounds fine when it's a choice. It's different when it's a physical job, a body with arthritis, and no exit. An unplanned early retirement, a layoff, an illness, a spouse who needs care is one of the most common financial shocks in American life, and it hits hardest the people with the thinnest cushion. Study after study finds that a large share of Americans retire earlier than they planned, and rarely because they wanted to. And there's the inheritance that never happens. Middle-class wealth in America has traditionally moved between generations through two things: the house and whatever savings were left over. When retirement consumes both, the next generation starts from zero. Economists talk about the great wealth transfer coming from the baby boomers. For families where the boomers retired broke, the transfer will be a bill, not a check. None of this is an accident, and none of it is a conspiracy. It's a series of choices. America chose a voluntary individual retirement system. If your employer offers a plan and you earn enough to contribute and you start early and the market cooperates and nothing goes wrong, it works beautifully. Every one of those ifs is where people fall through. Tens of millions of workers, especially part-time, low-wage, and gig workers, have no workplace plan at all. And people with no plan at work mostly don't save. That's not a character flaw. It's how the system is built. America also chose to keep Social Security modest. Other wealthy countries run public pensions that replace a much larger share of the average worker's income. The United States sits near the bottom of that list among rich nations on the theory that private savings would fill the gap. For the top half, it often does. For the bottom half, the gap just stays open. And the demographics are about to stress test everything. Right now, roughly 11,000 Americans turn 65 every day. By 2030, 1 in 5 Americans will be 65 or older. The generation arriving has less pension coverage than the one before it, more debt, and longer life expectancies. Retiring broke isn't a problem that's peaking. It's a problem that's boarding. So what does the economics of retiring broke actually tell us? That America runs two retirement systems side by side. One is for people with steady careers, workplace plans, and paid-off houses, and for them, the machine mostly works, with tax breaks all the way up. The other is Social Security plus luck. Half the country lives closer to the second system than the first. The money didn't disappear. It moved. From pension promises to shareholder returns, from employer risk to household risk, from wages that couldn't stretch to fees and interest that never miss. And when the private system comes up short, the public one catches what's left. Social Security keeping tens of millions above the poverty line, Medicaid waiting at the very end. Here's the thing to remember. In America, a comfortable retirement was never guaranteed. It was privatized. And for millions of people, the dividend never arrived. That's the economics of retiring broke. If this helped you understand where the money goes, a like and a subscribe help the channel keep digging into the numbers. Thanks for watching.